Hello and welcome to another edition of CN Meets. I'm Martin Fullard and today I'm joined by Shaun Hinds, the CEO of Manchester Central. How are you, Shaun?
Hello, Martin. I'm all right. Lovely to see you. How are you doing?
Absolutely. Maybe we'll see each other in person soon. Who knows?
Oh, crikey. Let's hope so. Let's bloody hope so.
Right, so now at the time of recording, it's been a year since we first went into lockdown. So really, as a venue operator like yourself, I'm keen to really just get your appraisal. How would you review the last 12 months from your perspective?
God. Well, most people will know we were one of the Nightingale hospitals. So 12 months ago, exactly, we were right in the middle of building the Nightingale. And I think that if that was the first chapter of this story of this year, I mean, that was a really interesting one because, we had an experience like no other. We're used to converting and changing our venue into different things, but we'd never undertaken anything like this, building a fully functioning hospital in the space of 3 weeks or so, and then delivering it literally on Easter Sunday was an incredible process to be a part of. And I think if I look back then, one of the things in our mind was we really thought, well, we didn't have a view of how long this was going to last. We were in discussions with the NHS about how long they wanted to have a contract for, and they were kind of saying, well, the summer, maybe July, maybe August. And actually, I remember at the time, even I was thinking, well, really, you should have September, because then that it takes away any doubt. We'll be in the clear, and then at least we can tackle the autumn with some confidence. Because even at that time, if you remember, we were dealing with events and customers that didn't know if they could run their event. You had events in March that were thinking, well, let's just push to May or to June. Great optimism being shown in those days. And I think that what then unfolded after the initial period of activity and excitement was really a sort of process of sort of stop-start and great uncertainty. As a nation and as society, we kind of navigated our way through this unfolding pandemic and all of the implications that came with it. And look, we won't spend today, recounting the calendar, but I think what it meant for us was that just dealing with a clear uncertainty that whenever you kind of made, and as business people, inherently, we're used to making plans. We're used to setting goals and objectives. We're used to, tracking our progress towards those milestones. And we just felt all of that just got turned upside down. And we did a good job, I think, with our teams in enabling them to work from home where they could work from home. But of course, like any venue, we have a good portion of our workforce that are their role is intrinsically linked with running events in the venue. So, as a result of things like the furlough scheme, those team members clearly went off in that direction, while other team members were involved in a range of different activities, really. And as I said to you just before we started, we got a number of things done that we wouldn't have otherwise normally have done so easily. We changed some of our business operating systems. We've introduced new operating technology, which we're really keen to sort of put to good use once we can start doing it. And tasks like that are much easier when you've got no other kind of things going on. Be much more difficult to change your finance system when you're running a business, for example. So we looked at that. We spotted the trend around virtual and hybrid pretty quickly. Our hands were somewhat tied behind our back because we were uncertain about how much of the venue we may or may not get back at some points during the year. And at one point in the year, we felt that actually we may have part of the venue back. And so we made some serious progress with launching our Live from the Auditorium products. And of course, you mentioned it at the beginning of our discussion. It's all about the moment in time that you make those decisions. And at that moment in time, we were in the summer. We had Eat Out to help out. We were looking forward to what might be a normalized autumn, and we felt actually the possibility of getting audiences, even small audience, back in front of a virtual event would be great. But anyway, things overtook us, and the pandemic took another turn. The second wave evolved. The possibility of us getting the venue back dissolved. And so we had to park that, and we turned our attention to other activities. But I think like everyone in the events industry, you know, we've been through all of the emotions. You know, there's been incredible uncertainty. We've had lots of false dawns. We've had lots of optimism that's only then just been squashed. And I think now we're in a place of, and I don't mean this to come out the wrong way, but we're in a place of resignation, really, which is it is what it is. You know, we can't wish for it to be sooner than it's going to be. We can't wish we'd done something differently back in the autumn that would mean we're in a different place now. But I think all of us in the industry are looking at things like the vaccination program. We're looking at what seems to be a roadmap that theoretically makes sense, and in terms of target dates is achievable. And we are working towards achieving those. But I think we're all pragmatic, and we all realize that, you know, we're probably going to see a couple more bumps in the road before we get there. And therefore our planning horizon realistically looks at an autumn prior, before we're going to see a return to what I think I would consider to be our normal conventional events. But that's not to say that we don't have some things planned for the summer. And if conditions allow, and if we're permitted, we hope to get the venue back into the events business pretty soon after we get it decommissioned from the Nightingale, which we expect to be, funnily enough, around about the 21st of June.
That's great stuff. I mean, we're talking about, you know, the venue, and I'm trying to think, you know, as you're talking there, is there a venue that has got such as diverse a history as Manchester Central? Because you've been a train station, a concert hall, primarily you are, and still be again an exhibition centre, and a hospital. I mean, how will having been that hospital impact your venue's legacy and, you know, and that of the wider city? You've played a tremendous role in so many different ways.
Absolutely, and we're very mindful of our position in the city, the role we play, the physical presence we have in the city, but also what we stand for in the city as well. And look, I must also remind you that we've served our time as a derelict NCP car park, and also a photo location for various Smiths album covers as well. So all of those take their place rightly in our history, along with obviously being one of the venues for the Commonwealth Games as well, which is quite interesting, which we may come onto in terms of how events lead legacy as well. But I think that this is a very valid and rich chapter in our history. I've said before, we may have even spoken about it ourselves, which is that when all of this started, the role that my son is supposed to be at school, by the way, but he's feigning illness. I mean, he's been back like a week. It's okay, mate. You carry on. Don't you worry. And I've lost my chain of thought, obviously, as he's gone by. But where was I? Talking about legacy. We think that this. I know exactly where. Sorry, apologies for that. I know exactly where I am now. What was interesting about when this started was it was the events industry that really stepped up to become part of the solution to this. It was the venues that were being looked at as temporary hospitals, but it was our contractors that in many cases that were building the hospital spaces inside. And it was many of our freelancers, our contractors, our team members that were actually putting themselves forward either for temporary jobs or for volunteering inside these facilities. And even now, as we've got testing centres and vaccination centres, many of them are staffed or volunteered by people that otherwise might be working in the events industry. So when Nightingale Northwest was configured, it was for the greater Northwest region. There were a number of clinical trusts in our region that were party to the Nightingale. I'm proud to say that, you know, because of all the effort that was put in, we were the most utilised Nightingale facility. So I think we'll look back knowing that at whatever definition, we made a difference in terms of the recovery and the response to the pandemic. And, you know, we'll remember, and I think it's testament to the versatility of our space that, you know, we can go from being a conference hall or an exhibition hall or a venue for a party or a celebration, right through to being a centre for clinical care, as a result of the transformation that both professional clinical contractors contributed, but also the work that our own teams and our events industry contributed as well. So I think it's going to be a proud chapter. I think it will be hopefully one that we're able to look back on, rather than one that kind of stays with us, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, that I'm hopeful that as we progress through the final stages of this pandemic, that we really do get to a sense of normality, and that we return our venue and our business to what it does best, and that we're able to reflect on this time with that sort of, I won't say nostalgia, but that kind of that consideration that I think it deserves. And I hope that that we're not living with a kind of clinical legacy, as a society, actually, for years to come, because I think that would be a really challenging situation for us, but to be in, both as a society but also economically as well.
Absolutely.
Blimey,
I was going to kind of like push my next two questions together into one, really. So let's look ahead. I was going to ask, what's the kind of calendar looking like over the next 12 months? But I want to add that to the question about client confidence as well. I mean, in your view, how does the trade show exhibition landscape maybe compare to the corporate conference association one? Because they are sort of different types of events with different attitudes and outlooks. And what really is going to inspire people to book live now for the remainder of 2021 and into 22?
Okay, so a few questions there. Just looking at our calendar to start with, because of the compression that we've seen as a result of postponements, moves, existing bookings that were already in the diary for future years before COVID, we're actually looking at what appears to be a fairly busy time ahead of us. Come September, we kick off with a couple of big shows. We've actually got a couple of banquets in prior to then as well. And so if conditions allow and we're able to run them, then I think we're going to jump back into business activity fairly quickly. Looking at the mix of business that we've got a real mixed bag of events coming up, a combination of conferences and exhibitions, some trade shows, some pure seminars, some pure banquets. We're seeing a real mixed bag, actually, amongst our exhibitors. Amongst our clients. We're seeing some trade shows that are really anxious to get back to live, partly because it's their bread and butter marketplace. These are businesses that rely on these physical trade shows, these expos, in order to sell their season's products or ranges, if it's within, say, furniture or fashion or annual consumables. And those organizations are really keen to get back and are reporting actually a real eagerness on behalf of their exhibitor base to be back in the room as well. So that's really, really encouraging. We're seeing some, as you might expect, some of we've got quite a strong portfolio of medical events, and certainly on the scientific medical side of things, we're seeing perhaps a little bit more hesitancy, a little bit more eagerness to push further into possibly even next year, to give them that certainty. Plus, you're talking about some constituent groups that have been really busy over the last 12 months or so. And so, their focus very much is trying to recalibrate if they're on the clinical operations side or if they're on healthcare provision side, they're looking at how they get back to a kind of more normalized thing. And indeed, conferences could form a part of that, but the organizers are very mindful of just what the constituent audiences have been through. So I think that's having a bearing on that. If you look at more consumer shows, we're seeing a massive demand. You could pretty much put anything on sale tomorrow, and it would sell out. And great to report local Manchester festival, the Parklife Festival, selling out, I think 120,000 tickets in 78 minutes yesterday. Massive demand, and admittedly a slightly younger age profile for Parklife, but across the board for consumer activities, we're seeing a real demand for people just wanting to do things, and that thinking is actually informing some of the things that we might do in the summer if we're allowed to do it. And then I think we'll see. We run a large season of Christmas parties, usually 26,000 people. I think it's too early to tell at the moment what what that might end up shaping up like. The organisers are definitely reporting an eagerness, but possibly on a slightly smaller scale. And I think, like everybody, every organizer, every delegate, exhibitor, sponsor is considering, well, what might the measures be like when we return? Is it going to be, as the Prime Minister hinted, that come the 21st, we could cast off our masks and get back to normal life? Or are we going to see in our industry additional measures imposed? And I urge some caution, as many of my colleagues in the industry do, about that, to make sure as an industry we don't sign up for protocols which are disproportionate compared to people that might want to go to B&Q or might want to go shopping or other non-regulated activities. The interesting aspect of our businesses are that we can create and control an environment which is safe and controlled. And therefore, that should give us some confidence to be able to operate in as normal a set of circumstances as possible. And I think we would caution against too many restrictions, because I believe that will put a number of people off. I think there's going to be different audiences that they want to get back to live, but they don't want to get back to live if it means they have to stay two meters away from everybody, if they have to wear masks, if they have this artificial experience. I think people are craving authenticity. That said, of course, we will work with the prevailing conditions, because as a venue and as an industry, we prove that we can adapt and we can do what it takes. And if we look to what's happening in the Far East, and where in spaces where events are taking place, we are seeing masks, and we are seeing some elements of distancing and some elements of other controls in place, but it's about that moment in time. That's here now in March. We're talking about September, October, and I think we all hope by then that it looks and feels much more normal. So I think we're optimistic, but throughout all of this pandemic, we're not getting too carried away with ourselves, and we're not thinking about trying to predict precisely what's going to be in play at that time, because frankly, until we get there, we're not necessarily going to know.
Well, I mean, it's everything we say and do these days just comes with a caveat, doesn't it? We will be glad to see the back of it, no less. So let's talk about your relationship as a venue with your own clients. I mean, the industry has shut down. It's never been more important for us to sort of stay in touch, despite us all being so far apart. So I'm just kind of going to ask, how have you sort of rethought your strategy as a venue on communicating with your clients? I mean, I saw the other day that you've actually launched your own podcast.
Yeah, funny enough, we started the podcast before COVID. Actually, we did a handful of them prior to that, which it was part of our continued efforts to promote the personality of what Manchester Central is about. I talked earlier about the role that we have in the city. We're both a physical sort of domineering presence, but we're also part of the landscape. We're part of the fabric of the city. And, I've encouraged us as a business to be, to show our personality, to be really open and really engaging. And then the podcast that we launched was Central Chat, was about really just embracing another means of communication. We've also, we've invested in 3D virtual tour technology, so that we can maintain, in the absence of being able to do physical site visits, we've been able to do virtual site visits with some of the organisers and planners that we've been working with over the last 12 months, and that's been very, very popular. And we continue to use digital and multimedia to try and get across the sort of the way that we're thinking, and some of the developments and some of the initiatives that we're launching. I talked about live from the auditorium. That's literally ready to go once we've got the venue back. We also took a decision, to invest in a dedicated studio in some of our space. So actually reconfiguring some of our space within the facility to offer those organisers that want it a proper hybrid solution. So I think as organisers and show owners get their heads around what live attendance looks like, complemented by some level of maybe virtual or online participation. How do you deliver that during a live event? And we're taking our cue from major sporting events, major TV coverage, where you've got the TV studio and you hub the viewer's experience from a studio, but actually what's going on in the stadium or what's going on in the arena or in the convention center, well, you only get that if you're actually there live. And I think we will find that space. So I think we're keeping an eye on the future. We're looking at ways that we can take some of the positive progress that's been made over the last 12 months and incorporate that into our offer going forward. And I think as an industry, we're getting our heads around exactly what that means, because there's clearly the audience expansion opportunities of online are just so significant that we can't ignore them. But equally, we know that virtual exhibitions and virtual seminars are just not as effective. There's almost a sort of disposability about some virtual events. They're omnipresent, they're ubiquitous, there's always a seminar about something going on somewhere, and it becomes almost this kind of disposable wallpaper. And I think that what we all crave is those real meaningful, engaged, immersed experiences. And so what it does mean, I think, that is when people do return to live, the people that are there are going to really value being there. And I actually think that means that live events will be even more rewarding and more the return that you get from your investment in live is going to be much greater than perhaps it's been in the past. So perhaps a good shake-up for the industry in a way, but definitely the smart shows and the smart organizers are going to look for ways for combining both.
Absolutely. Now, last question for you, bigger picture, looking at the city landscape as a whole, maybe even the wider region. Is there a renewed sense of enthusiasm for the event sector locally in Manchester, and the wider area? I mean, back in 2019, I was up there for the launch of the 5-year plan, which, aspired to grow conference business by about 40% or something, 300 million pounds worth. I'm sure that's obviously now been delayed, but is there a real sense of enthusiasm to really go for it as a city and make yourselves a true destination for business events?
Yes, is the very short answer. Absolutely. We're an events city anyway, with our sports, with our music heritage, and with our business events heritage. We are a city that thrives on those big activities. As Martin, the legacy of events, particularly business events, is long-term and far-reaching. It leads to investment, foreign direct investment. It leads to local domestic investment. It leads to academic research. It leads to R&D centres being set up. It leads to economic policy decisions being debated and decided. And we've got a very strong legacy in Manchester of events that have led to those longer term implications and positive outcomes. Our university capability establishments within the city are almost second to none, globally renowned. Some of the scientific research that's coming out of some of our facilities, and one that springs to mind is, for example, the Christie in terms of cancer research. You can trace back a lot of those investments and a lot of those establishments to some conferences and events that may have taken place. Our mayor is very pro activity, very pro events. We're really eager to get Manchester on the map. We view the opportunity and Brexit, I'm going to say Brexit, it creates lots of both positive and negative implications, but there's clearly an opportunity with Britain as an independent party now on a global stage. We've got world-class connectivity in the northwest via our airports and our rail and our road systems. So I think we can stand proud amongst other capital cities, and as soon as we can, we're going to be banging the drum about getting events back. So I think we'll continue to promote why Manchester is the destination, is a fantastic destination, and maybe we'll benefit perhaps if I've said before that there's so much concentration of event activity in London. And it may be that one of the outcomes of this last year is that there is more regionalized and more localized activity, which will be good for bigger cities, not just Manchester, but other northern cities, and perhaps other regional cities in other European countries as well that can stand on their own and become those valid destinations in their own, if they've got their brand proposition, their visitor economy proposition, and their visitor experience proposition sorted. And I think we absolutely do have that in Manchester, and we're all eager, and we meet regularly as a group within the city, and we're all eager to for that day that we're allowed to get stuff going again, because the moment we do, I think we'll see a big bounce.
Absolutely. Shaun, it has been genuinely fascinating to talk to you. Some real enthusiasm up there in the Northwest, no doubt. And I wish you Godspeed, and hope to dear God that you get the venue open before the end of the year.
Well, look, thank you, Martin. And look, it's been said to you before, but thank you and your organisation for all the work that you put into this as well. You've been a beacon of clarity. You've been a beacon of information amongst all of this noise, and you've represented our sector excellently. So, on behalf of our industry, thank you.
Thank you very much, Shaun.